Dear viewers, today we are going to discuss Prague Structuralism. In a way, Prague Structuralism has developed from Formalism. Formalism itself sprang from the continental European literary tradition that began in Russia in the second decade of the 20th century. The Russian linguist Roman Jakobson was a prominent formalist. In the later 1920s, Roman Jakobson moved to Prague because of the repressive Soviet regime. Before we proceed to discuss the important assumptions of Prague Structuralism, it is pertinent to have a word about formalism. Formalism depends on the theory of literariness. It is a quality that makes literary texts different from non-literary texts. Literature distinguishes itself from non-literary language because it employs a whole range of devices that have a defamiliarizing effect. Literature renews itself by making itself strange again. It does so when its current forms become overly familiar, and it falls a prey to a sort of automatization. Literature renews itself by means of the contrast with what is known and has become routine. The contrast is achieved by the function of devices, rather than by any innate qualities they might possess. Central to that function is the idea of difference. Now, Prague Structuralism advances its argument from this point. It also sees a literary text as a structure of differences. According to Prague Structuralism, a literary text is a structure in which all the elements are interrelated and interdependent. There is nothing in a literary text that can be seen and studied in isolation. Each single element has a function through which it is related to the work as a whole. As the formalists were mainly interested in the defamiliarizing elements within literary art, they did not pay any attention to the elements that did not directly contribute to the defamiliarizing process. But for the structuralists, everything played a role in what a text was and did. The structuralists further developed the formalist notion of function. They claimed that literature is not only concerned with itself, but it also refers to the outside world, as opposed to the formalists, who were mainly interested in the self-referential aspect of literature. Now the term functions means how textual elements achieve defamiliarization because of their difference from their environment. Structuralists, the text as a whole, not just the literary text, has a function too, and it is on the basis of the way a text functions as a whole that we can distinguish between various sorts of texts. A text function is determined by its orientation. These orientations are basically those of a so-called speech act. They derive from what they do with the speech. The speech act or orientation is the message conveyed by the text. In terms of orientation, literary texts are always oriented towards their forms, not towards the outside world or the potential readers. But in actual practice, texts have more than one orientation and more than one function simultaneously. In such cases, the orientation of a text towards itself, which is also called its poetic function, is dominant or most important. In this respect, structuralist approach is different from the formalist approach. Formalism is only concerned with the self-referential aspect of literature, but structuralism allows for more than one orientations of a text. But its referential aspect must be subservient to its self-referential aspect. The dominant orientation of a text or its poetic function is also called its literary code. The text is held together by its dominant as a coherent whole. It is a structure in which all elements, whether they defamiliarize or not, are interrelated and interdependent. Last but not the least, the structuralist replaced defamiliarization by foregrounding. The term foregrounding is inspired by the idea that human mind has the capacity to filter out relevant information out of infinite number of data that our senses present to it. Foregrounding draws the reader's attention to itself and obscures everything else, while defamiliarization points to a static relationship between the defamiliarizing element and other elements. Foregrounding emphasizes the dynamism of that relationship. Foregrounding draws the reader's attention towards itself and obscures everything else, while defamiliarization points to a static relationship between the defamiliarizing element and other elements. Foregrounding emphasizes the dynamism of that relationship. What one element gains in terms of being foregrounded is lost by the other elements that constitute its background. In other words, just like the idea of a dominant, foregrounding implies a perspective that sees a text as a structure of interrelated elements. In contemporary literary criticism, foregrounding has effectively replaced defamiliarization. To conclude, Prague Structuralism is an improvement upon formalism. It also sees the literary text as a structure of differences. Though a literary text usually have more than one orientation, its dominant orientation is towards itself. It is also called poetic function or its literary code. Foregrounding is made possible by the existence of a background. Foreground and background, the unfamiliar and the familiar, function within one single structure and together create poetic effects. Thank you very much.